Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Friend of the show, Anthony Lee is back. We're going to be talking about AI today. I know everyone's been on it and you've probably seen it all over LinkedIn. We now know that you can write press releases related to changes on your listings, etc. People finding creative ways, reinstatement of listings is great. But what we want to do today is go a bit more deeper. For those of you know Anthony, he likes to go deep on a lot of subjects like this, and he's been down the rabbit hole for about 2 or 3 weeks, and he's got a lot of interesting stuff that hasn't been necessarily popularized at the moment. So welcome to the show, Anthony. And then what we're going to do a shared screen, so for those who are tuning in, you'll be able to look at the YouTube version as well. There will be some technical stuff in there, but hopefully it'll blow your mind. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is always a pleasure to talk to the Seller Sessions audience. This is
Yep.
this is definitely my favorite place to share the stuff that I am working on. So thank you.
Thank you. The check's in the post, by the way. So what I'm going to do, is I'll pull this up on the screen, and then we'll let you get underway, and then you can walk us through various different things from the basics, and then by look at you've got some programming language up as well. So, and you're not a programmer, correct?
Not at all. Not even
No.
remotely.
So there are means and ways for if you're not a programmer, is to understand this by interfacing with the AI as well to help you move it along, right? So let me bring it up into the screen here, and I'll let you get underway.
Absolutely. All right. So what we're looking at here is the interface that undoubtedly everybody is the most familiar with, right? ChatGPT. And it's funny because I know that I've been deep diving for a few weeks now, but I actually signed up for OpenAI and this interface like a year ago. But back then when it was, I think the text 2 version, or before they had Da Vinci, which is a reference to the model. Back then, it was just kind of like a chatbot. Like if you've ever played with Replica, for example, which is now like a little bit risque and more for adults, but at one point it was just a chatbot. This was kind of like that too, right? So you go in and you talk to it, and it's almost like a chat version of Google. It was cool, but not necessarily very useful. Since the model has become upgraded and we have Da Vinci, Chat GPT 3, we are like, it's amazing because basically they took this incredibly advanced natural language processing, machine learning algorithm, and fed it the entirety of the World Wide Web up until 2021. So it knows almost everything. Anyway, so a lot of content has gone out. This is like how how a lot of people use it. You can ask it questions, right? So this is the basic stuff. How can I use Amazon's fulfillment service to reduce costs and improve efficiency? And it has, kind of a stock answer. It'll tell you stuff that it's probably getting directly from Amazon pages, but it has indexed all of it. So, it'll tell you stuff about Amazon's fulfillment service and essentially the most logical information. Now, I just want to briefly kind of go over how this is doing this, right? Basically, the way OpenAI ChatGPT, the way it works is it is technically a document completion program. And what that means is it's there to complete text, essentially, whatever the most logical next thing should be. So that's why when you go in and you ask it a question, it can answer it because that is how it completes the text. So with that in mind, you can kind of like that kind of colors the way that you can expect it to respond. But a lot of people come in here and they'll use it to ask questions, and it's good at answering. Sometimes you like the answer, sometimes maybe not. However, what many people in our space are trying to do is have it do things like, write listings, right? So there are a couple of different ways that you can kind of prompt it, right? So one of them was one of the conversations I had here with ChatGPT was I told it was a prompt engineer and I needed to write a prompt, like help me write a prompt. This is like an inception moment, right? If you don't know how to write prompts for the AI, you can say, hey, ChatGPT 3, help me write a prompt for the AI. And I was asking it to help me write a prompt so that it could come back and give me a good listing. So it said, to write an optimized Amazon product listing using ChatGPT 3, follow these steps. And it gave a list of how to structure the wording that I would use in order to get the AI to come back with a good answer. And the cool part about ChatGPT, which is different from OpenAI, which we'll get into in a second,
For those who
is
listen on the
that
podcast, can
you
you
can
give the
iterate.
for those who listen on the podcast and not got a visual, can you just quickly give the highlights of those 5 key points so they
Oh
understand
yeah, of
what?
course. I'm
Yeah,
so sorry. I
yeah,
forgot that people are going to be listening to this audio only. All right. So the response that I got from ChatGPT was to write an optimized Amazon product listing using ChatGPT 3. Follow these steps, and
yeah,
it told me how to do the prompt. So it was start by providing ChatGPT with a clear, concise description of the product, including key benefits and features.
mm,
And then it also explains like why that's important. So it says this is to help ChatGPT understand the product. And then next, provide ChatGPT with some information about the target audience. And
mm,
then it said, be sure to include relevant keywords. And then provide ChatGPT with examples. And then finally, be sure to proofread the generated listing. So it was good advice,
mm,
but I just loved how it's structured. Um, it's structured kind of like how somebody can build the prompt. So that's a cheat code right there.
yeah,
Anything that you don't know how, like any way that you don't know how to communicate with the AI, you can just ask the AI to help
mm,
you figure out. And I'll go more into that in a second. But what I was going to say about ChatGPT 3 that's different from OpenAI is that this allows you to continuously update the conversation. So
mm,
uh, right now, the AI model, DaVinci, has the ability to remember up to like a little over 8,000 words of conversation. So basically what happens once you hit like 9,000 words is it starts to forget what you guys have been talking about,
mm,
right? Which back when it was only 2,000 made it very limited. But now, I mean, 8,000 characters or 8,000 words, sorry, not characters.
mm,
8,000 words is like a novella, right? So you can have a really in-depth conversation.
mm,
The cool part about this interface is that you can sit there and go back and forth with it.
mm,
And and I'll get into like how to use that to your advantage, but this is an example of what I used it right here for. I asked it for prompt, it told me the prompts or how to structure the prompts, and then I came back and said responses to your above suggestions are as follows, and I answered I gave the prompts. I
mm.
answered the
In the
questions.
numbered order of the questions of the listed prompts. Yeah.
Exactly. So I responded to exactly what it told me. And then it gave me what it said, what it thought was an optimized listing. So it gave me a title,
Mm,
gave me some bullet points. Well, I was like, hey, the problem here is that it's very short, right? The
yeah.
bullets are all like very, very few characters. So I came back and said, hey, rewrite this listing. The
Mm,
title should include the benefits, and the bullet points should be more persuasive and informative. So it came
yeah.
back with a little bit longer of a title and then a
Mm,
little bit longer of bullet points. Anyway, so that was just an example of it doing a title and bullet points for an Amazon listing based on prompts that it told me that I should use, and it gives you an example of the iterative process of using ChatGPT. You go in and you can talk back and forth with it. Anyway, so the cheat code, like I just shared, was that you can ask it for the prompts. You can ask it to revise what it just told you up to a little over 8,000 words. It will be able to go back to the conversation and know what you're talking about. So it's a continued, natural language conversation. What's really cool though is that the real cheat code is that then you can go back to it. This is the reason why everybody keeps saying that it might replace Google. And I don't think that's going to happen, because I believe Google is going to come up with their own tool that does this. But basically, you know how you go to YouTube to learn stuff? Now you can just ask ChatGPT. So this is what I did. I had some code. I'm not a coder. I had some code. I had an embed widget for a WordPress page.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it just kept showing up on the left. There was no way to center align it. The block wouldn't, the WordPress like theme wouldn't let it center align. So I said, hey, I have this widget code. Can you make it center aligned? And ChatGPT did. And then I tried it and didn't work. And I was like, hey, that didn't align the widget. Just so you know, I'm trying to center it on a WordPress page using a custom HTML block, which is just one of those drag and drop like little modules that you pull into the page on your WordPress theme. And it goes, oh, I apologize for the confusion. Here is the code you should use. And it worked. And then, but it wasn't showing up right in mobile. And I was like, can you make it mobile responsive? And then it added more code to make it mobile responsive. But for some reason, it didn't show up right in mobile. So I said, hey, can you help me with the height? Because the widget was showing up too short. And it added more code and explained to me why it works this way and what I should do to make it work in the future. I had to make some changes to the widget. So I came back and said, hey, all that stuff you just did, can you do that again, but to this widget code now? And it did. And that is incredible, right? No thumbing through however many YouTube videos to figure out how to do this, right? To suddenly learn code. No hiring somebody on Fiverr. So the real cheat code here is this, but basically how you have to understand how to use it is you have to iterate, right? Give it a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the secret that I've been unlocking with it, is give it a little bit at a time, and it doesn't overwhelm it. So if you're going to use this for something like listing optimization, you said it can write press releases, et cetera, rather than just say, hey, write this whole thing, you should take it chunk by chunk. So you go in and you say, hey, I'm trying to write a listing for, this thing, this garlic press. And then you say, this is how I think it should be described. These are the unique benefits. Can you give me a title? Start with the title. And then when it gets you a title if it gives you a title you don't like, describe how you want it to be changed. And then keep reiterating until you get the right title. And then when you have the right title, you go, okay, I need bullet points. I need them to be at least this many characters each. I need it to explain the benefits, and I want it to be done for this product. And then you give it the title again, so it's aware that you're talking about the same product. And then it'll provide you the bullets. And then you kind of iterate into the description the same way. And that is how you use ChatGPT. Basically, it's like, how we pay all this money to go to masterminds and sit down with people who think the same way, that, similarly, or have interests in the same things that we do. And we kind of bounce each other ideas off each other. In the absence of being in a mastermind group, you use ChatGPT as your mastermind partner, and you go to it and you ask. It's going to be the smartest friend you've ever had. You go to it and you ask it questions. Hey, how do I accomplish this? And then you iterate until you have a final product that you're good with. And that's e-com listings, that's code, that's everything.
Yeah. So it's really, I suppose because we're in an industry, like I'll give you an example from a couple of years ago when I was posting a load of memes on my page. People messaged me from the music industry, because in music before, and they're like, Dan, these all seem hilarious, but not to me. I don't understand them. And then people chimed in and said, no, if you're on Amazon, you'll get it. But if you're not, it'll just go completely over your head. But he see all the comments and he's like, well, there's something funny here and I don't get it. And the reason I mention that is we're in a niche down community. So when you're using these tools, like I actually tried to do some stuff with A9, I got nowhere with it. I was like, okay, let's see what it turns up. It's just junk, basically. It might as well been sent out by seller support. So where is it with the prompts? Generic prompts will work well. I suppose the listing, you're feeding the content, and that's just about the listing. But how is there other ways of niching down to educate the AI to give you not only better responses, but it stores in the AI that can provide something further down the road when you need it? You know, like you just turn it into a best friend, right?
Yeah.
Is there a
Okay.
way that that constant feed into them, he learns so much that it can pick up the non-textual aspects, you know, the non-tangibles? Because we're in a community for the last 7-8 years, right? So
Mhm.
we kind of know how everything works, moves, and everything else, and we're used to the culture of that. But
Mhm.
with the AI, it won't be used to those non-tangibles. Is like, is
Correct.
there any way of getting it closer? Because you said mastermind, but will it know anything about URLs, you know, certain things with PPC? Is there a way of training those elements in?
Yeah. So what we were just talking about was
Mm.
ChatGPT, which is
Yeah,
the chat interface.
yeah,
And so you can actually train it within those 8,000 words, right? So
right.
if it's something that you can kind of give it
Yeah,
context for that
yeah,
won't take, you know, a thousands of words and years to learn, like just give it
mm,
context, that then you use it. Just remember, it remembers up to like 8,096 words, right? So
mm,
like remember that you can sit there and you can inform it as you're talking to it. So the next,
mm,
if you're talking to ChatGPT in that moment, and you're talking about the A9, you can absolutely, you know, feed it that article by the doctor whose name I can't remember, with the
Soren,
joy.
the joy of ranking,
Mhm.
Dorina Sorkin, wasn't it? Dorina
Yes,
Sorkin. Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So, like, you could feed it that. You could say, "Hey, here's this article that to kinda give you context about what we're talking
yeah,
about," and it should help. But
yeah,
that is still in a limited space. So, moving
yeah,
up, right, away from the chat is when you start using the tool,
hmm,
behind the chat, which is a little bit more advanced, and this is,
yeah,
where you use the API. So it has under the beta.openapi.com, which is
hmm,
the account that you have to have in order to use ChatGPT.
yeah,
Uh, it is, you interface with it through APIs, but it has a playground. This is where, like, you don't need the API, you use their
mm,
interface.
yeah,
In the playground, you have the ability to, give it more context, right? So here, the problem is it's not iterative, so you can't,
mm,
like, it's harder to go back and forth with it. But
yeah,
here, you're going to give it a more structured prompt, and I'll give you an example of.
mm,
So there's some prompt engineers that have been working in the AI space with OpenAI for years now, and
mm,
they've written a couple of really awesome articles. And if you're ever curious about learning how to do more of this, just Google prompt engineering or prompt design. You will find a
mm,
ton of articles and some research papers, which may or may not be difficult to follow. So you
mm,
might have to actually ask for ChatGPT's help in
mm,
in summarizing them. But basically, what I learned from one of them, one of the best structures, is
mm,
this right here. So you do prompts, and then you do examples, and then you do constraint.
right,
Or constraints, right? So that's the structure. And this is what you type in. And then in the prompt, you do the prompt, whatever the prompt
mm,
is, right? Write me a, write me a 5-point outline on an article about neuromarketing, right?
hmm,
And then the example is, you would give it legitimate examples. There are two ways that I use this. You can give it examples of outlines on the topic that you're asking it for, or another one I do is example structure, where it knows to only use the structure but not the actual context of the
mm,
examples you give it. So this would be where I would, I like to put everything in quotes, so it knows that I'm talking about this thing specifically. So I'll give it, an example structure is one dot, and then some type of, you know example here as far as like how long I want it to be, how detailed I want it to be. And then under constraints, this is where you give it parameters, right? Like, each uh, outline point must be at least 250 characters
Hmm.
or at least 50 words. You know what I mean? Like you give
Yeah.
it constraints, and then if you don't give it any examples, that's called a zero shot.
Hmm.
And that's when the AI gets to do whatever it wants. You give it one example, that's a one shot. You give it anything more than that, it's called a fuse shot. All of the experts say that fuse shot is the absolute best because you can really really define what it is that you need. So you want to try and give it examples, but that's the outline, right? So you have the prompt, you have the examples, you have the constraints. So, for example, if you're trying to optimize a listing, the prompt would be, again, I still feel like you need to do this in chunks. So
Hmm.
the prompt would be, write me a title, and then
Yeah.
you give it example structures. You give it like 4 or 5 titles so
Hmm.
that it knows how long they should be. If you keep because most of the titles nowadays have the brand name in them. If you keep the brand name in it, it's gonna want to use a brand name, and every now and again it'll snag one from the title if you don't give it a brand name, or from the examples if you don't give it a brand name, for example. But yeah, example structures, you give it the titles, and then constraint, you tell it how long you want it to be, and then you get a title out of that, and then you can do the same thing for the bullets and the same thing for the description. But if you're talking about like wanting it to understand more complex things, that's where the examples come in. This is where the fuse shots. So you make it a fuse shot. So if you're talking about um, the prompt being, write me a summary of the relevance ranking system that Amazon employs in its A9, right?
Hmm.
Then the example would be at the Joy of Ranking article, and you'd
Yeah.
paste it right there, and then you give it any constraints if it has any, and then
So would
boom.
it accept only URLs, or would it accept audio recordings or video? Is there's no other than it's always going to be text format, right?
It's only text right now. It's only text right now.
Yeah.
This is an example of the of how it's this is we're so early.
Yeah.
This is what's going to happen in the future, but right now it's only
Mm.
text.
Yeah.
So what you have to do basically, if you want to feed it anything from the web, is scrape web pages, and then you give
Yeah.
it scraped data from the web pages, or use Descript to transcribe the YouTube video and give it the transcription. So you
Mm.
give those examples and then constraints, and then you should end up with a much more robust answer. But this is how you
Yeah.
determine that. This is how you control that. First, you have to make sure that you put. Right now, it only does 2048 maximum tokens. That will
Yeah.
go up in the future with GPT-4.
Yeah.
But right now, you just make sure you have that at the max so it knows that it can use
Let me
all of
ask
the
you, is
room.
that the tokens is per character or these
No.
tokens, what do they reference tokens?
Okay. That's actually a really good question, and I'm glad that you asked it. So, like I said, this is a document completion program,
Mm.
essentially. So in that, it is counting characters, but not every character is only one character, right? You have
Mm.
symbols, you have
Yeah.
different languages. Obviously,
Mm.
completely throw that out the window because sometimes a character can be like three and or bytes, right? So there's so many different. I mean, we know about bytes, right? We
Mm.
did we dealt with this in Amazon. So there's so many
Yeah.
different bytes that a character can be, uh, and it can't just read words too, like
Mm.
word numbers, because they're numbers, they're emojis, because it understands emojis as well.
Mm.
So because it can't count words and it can't count characters because of the bytes, being different, its version of counting characters is tokens. So
Mm.
tokens is just the way this AI, this machine learning algorithm was programmed to understand, the length and composition of a body of bytes, essentially.
Mm.
So usually it works out to be like 4 tokens is like a word on average, right?
Mm.
Anyway, so you're not going to have a one to one there, but about 2048 tokens. should be a couple thousand, or it should be over 1,000 words. It should be pretty wordy. So what's interesting though is that everything counts in the token count, right? So that's the prompt, the examples, the constraints, and its answers. So that does limit it a little bit, but you still have some room to give it. Like you should be able to put a whole article in there, as long as it's not like a ridiculously long, like 3,000 word article, like the stuff that I write sometimes. You should be able to put it in there, and then that gives it a lot more context for you to really get a robust answer. But what you are asking is, how do you give it context that it took us years to build? Right?
Yeah.
So this is where it gets super. Oh, real quick though, I wanted to show after the tokens. A lot of people don't know that this exists. Temperature. Are you familiar with this?
No, you mentioned, I was asking you questions on Copy AI about having a bit more control over what's coming back, and you said to adjust the temperature, and it doesn't have a temperature control in there.
Yeah.
From what I could see, or you said look for a temperature control.
Yeah. So how this works in OpenAI, temperature is it tells the AI how much it can deviate from the examples. So temperature doesn't really mean anything unless you give it examples. But if you give it examples and you set the temperature at like 0.2, then it's going to basically give you something that looks almost just like the example. If you put it at 0.5, it's going to be incredibly similar to the example. If you put it at 1, you're basically telling the AI, use your creativity, use as much of the example as you feel is necessary. And then it's going to give you something totally unique. And that is how you control making sure that the same inputs don't give you the same outputs.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, so now we're going to talk about like the super crazy cool stuff.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to give, I'm trying to see if I even have it still. Let's say you want to give years of context to the AI. Well, if you look at the documentation, because remember I told you OpenAI works through APIs. If you look at the documentation, it'll tell you how to what's called fine tune it. So you know how you're restricted to 2,048 tokens in a single usage.
Yeah.
So when you fine tune, basically you create. Here's an example. You create a file. It's called a JSON list of compressed JSON objects.
Yeah.
And they're examples of exactly what you want the AI to do, right? So you give it an example prompt and an example completion, right? Because completion, like I said, it's a Word document completion program. So you give it a prompt, you give it a completion. As long as that one JSON will not exceed the 2048 token limit, you can put as many of these as you want in a file. The documentation says you should do at least 500 lines, 500 JSON objects. But if you put like thousands in there, so basically what you would have to do if you want to train this on, some A9 level stuff, right, is you would find 500 or more pieces of relevant information about A9 the way that we understand it.
Yeah.
And you would format that into an example prompt and completion where you ask that, you pretend like you're asking an AI something and it gives you the answer is some fact about the A9 that, based on how we understand it. You'd format that into JSON objects. And if you don't know how to do that, you can do what I do, and you can ask ChatGPT to format those. I'm trying to find where I did this. No, I think that's on a completely different tab. Anyway, right here. You could ask it to format it for you, and then it will give you the JSON objects, and you put it in a file like this, and then obviously you have somebody come behind you and check to make sure that that the JSON objects are like real, complete. If not, it's cool. The API will actually, before you spend any money, the API will actually tell you, hey, that didn't work. Line whatever has an error, and you can go back in and change it. Anyway, and then You take that file of your 500 plus JSON objects with all of your in-depth mastermind level knowledge, and you post it to your OpenAI account through an API handler like Postman, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you come back to OpenAI, I don't have one right now because I'm still working on the file, but when you come back
Yeah.
to OpenAI, there will be a section over here that says
Mm-hmm.
fine tunes,
Yeah.
and it'll be there. And then when you click, instead of text DaVinci 3, you'd click that fine tune, and
Yeah.
then you don't have to give it as many examples because it already knows what you're talking about based on the hundreds of lines of examples you've already fed it.
So one, just springing up as we're going through it here, is really if you got expert domain knowledge on your products, and the biggest concern is to employ a team to work on complex products as your customer service team, and all the training that you'd have to do. So effectively, you could train the AI for a multitude of responses and get it to understand the in-depthness of your in-depthness, if that's a word.
Absolutely.
How highly in depth on your product domain, the stuff that only you would and certain amount of people could possibly know without spending months, weeks on training.
Right,
That could be fed that way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, like 100%. That's what that tool is there for. Those are fine tunes. Now, keep in mind that you pay for those. Those cost tokens, and the tokens, cost money. Last time I looked at it, you could do like, I don't know, it was like 500 or 600 lines for like $20. So if you put it, if you give it a couple thousand, you might spend $100, but then you're going to have this model. And anybody on your team that uses it, it's gonna, like, this right here is the, hundreds and hundreds of examples of exactly what they're going to use it for. So they try to use it for something outside of the scope of that model, it's going to get some wonky results, right? You're going to be like, this isn't right. But if you use it within the scope of that model, so that means if you're a brand owner, for example, you take all of your competitors, every scrap of information you can on their branding or their products or whatever it is that you want to train this model on, make sure that you give it good examples of prompts that you would use, right? Like, give me an idea for a product that my customer base would like. And it knows what your customer base is because that was part of the training, the fine tuning. Then yeah, exactly. And then your team goes in there and it just communicates with the AI, and the AI knows a crap ton about your business. And obviously the bigger that file, the better, right? If you give it like 10,000 lines of JSON objects, then you're like, it's going to know more. This is how you train an AI.
Yeah.
So
excellent. Is there anything, we covered quite a lot there. Is there any other things just off the top of your head on a more basic level as well? And I know there's a lot of content out there now. Even the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's blitzed, isn't it? Do you have a hit list for Amazon sellers to run through? We've talked about previously, I don't know if I can't remember if we mentioned it here. Reinstatements, great for that. Is there other Amazon stuff that's outside of listing, using it for reinstatements, a bit of customer service? So there are other things you can think of that you've been testing?
The sky's the limit as far as what you want it to churn out, right? Legal documents are really good. Like stuffy web pages, like privacy policies or terms of service policies for your website are really good. And then again, like, if you want to add something to your website and you don't feel like contacting your developer, it's also really good to say, hey, I want to add this to a Shopify page. Can you give me, can you tell me how? Like, all that stuff is really good. But I think the biggest key, like, we went some deep stuff. This is for like people with bigger teams or bigger budgets that want to build something.
Yeah.
For the normal average user, really the most likely usage is going to be the chat interface. So for the average user, I think the biggest key is that you have to learn to give it bite-sized bits of information and then have that conversation within 8,000 words. And really, like, leverage the knowledge of the entire World Wide Web throughout the conversation and continue to iterate. And don't just accept, like, you don't have to get an answer. Here's the thing. A lot of people think they get an answer they don't like, they either give up, they say, the AI is weird, it doesn't understand my topic. or they might hit the regenerate button a lot and then still not get the answer. It's like, no, it's iterative. It's literally learning about you and what you want in the conversation you're having with it. So
Yeah.
utilize those 8,000 words well. Utilize all of them. Go in there and keep having that conversation until you get what you want out of it. And if it wonks out, starts forgetting stuff, or it's just not understanding, then start over. Then literally refresh the browser, put a new chat in there, and start over. You will get it to understand what you need, and it will be able to provide you with that. So the biggest tip is that right there. Just iterate and continue to treat it like, and talk to it in plain English or plain whatever language you type in, and continue to get it to fully understand what you need. That is the biggest tip.
You know, I'm worried about the onslaught of ebooks coming now. Getting buried in ebooks.
So I'm going to share with you something that I haven't told anybody yet. Hopefully, I actually am able to follow through with this. And maybe now that I'm saying it to your audience, I will. But I'm actually working on a book. I'm not letting the AI write the whole thing. Because I believe that AI is not a good replacement for humans.
No.
AI is a great tool to use collaboratively. So I'm actually trying to write a book in collaboration with the AI. So I can demonstrate how to collaborate with AI in a way to get maximum output. Because that's what I think. I think AI makes me, it's a superpower, you know, it's like my cybernetic arm.
Yeah, since I've been using it, it's turned me into Hemingway, and I could barely read and write. So
exactly, there you go. And then, you know, for people who have higher level skills, because a lot of people talk about this, they're like, you know, everybody's like, oh, is AI going to replace my job? And then you got copywriters being like, AI can never replace you if you're any good. And both of y'all are missing the point. If you're not good at it, it'll make you competent. If you're good at it, it'll make you amazing.
Yeah. It's an add-on, isn't it? And help with productivity in terms of creating, if you're doing content, which I'll cover on later shows on that stuff. But yeah, no, it's great because it takes a lot of the pain out of it. And if you know your domain inside out, it's different if you want to go, oh, I want to write something on something I don't know and then ask AI to do it. There's no way to really check it. But if you know how to write the prompts and ask the right questions, and it is your domain experience and knowledge, your prompts is correcting it as it goes because you had the domain knowledge. It just means you haven't got to spell out all those words onto a page yourself if you don't communicate naturally that way. You know, I do a podcast, but you won't sit there and get me writing blog posts week after week because that's not where I sit. I found that, you know, I communicate best with my voice. Therefore, I use that as an attribute, you know, as a form of communication, where some people are very fluent in getting there and articulating himself very well through the written word, you know?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It can allow you to amplify your voice on mediums that you don't usually amplify it on or utilize that much. It can also help you enhance the stuff that you do well. For example, as a writer, you know, you might think that I don't need it for stuff, but it's great at, like, here's another way to use it. It's great at rewriting stuff. If you read it and it just doesn't seem like it, you know, it's right. Especially if you're not native speaker of the language you're writing in, this is the perfectly. Just tell it, say, hey, can you make this sound? Which is actually a comment on I'm about to make on the tools, right? So we just talked about ChatGPT and OpenAI, but people out there mostly are used to Copy AI or Jasper or you know, Write Sonic and all these other tools. You know, the settings that it gives you, like write in this voice or this voice, that's just them pre-coding prompts. Right. So anyway, so like when you go in there and you're like, I feel like this wasn't in the voice that I wanted it to be in. That's when you use those other tools, for example, and you say, hey, can you write this in a persuasive tone or a friendly tone? That's just, you know, pre-made prompts. Or if you go into OpenAI, you can tell it yourself, can you write this in this tone? Anyway, but yeah, it's a tool. It's an amplifier tool that can help you get your output faster, to maximize output in a much faster way. And they all basically work the same, right? It's either the prompts are pre-coded where you're writing the prompts. If you don't feel comfortable writing prompts, then hey, you want to pay $20 a month for one of these tools, that's cool, because they had some really smart guys put together the prompts for you so you could tell it the voice, and they've already figured out like what the temperature should be, so like how creative the AI should be, and that's why a lot of those tools are useful, and that's why they got so popular, because they were kind of doing they were kind of cutting some of the learning curve for everybody. But if you're not trying to go out there and utilize those, then you can do it for much less for on the open AI, and then just figure it out yourself. And again, you can ask GPT while it's free to help you figure it out.
Yeah. The other thing that I've just got into using it for is for hashtags as well. Even though I use Flick, which is really good, you know, setting for medium, high and low hashtags, and then the amount that you want, I now feed it the article or the script for the video, and I prompt them with asking them, can you give me super relevant hashtags on Instagram? Because if that changes for TikTok and stuff, on Instagram, I would like 10 of each. I want low traffic hashtags, medium traffic, and high traffic. And then it breaks them down into those various different options. And then you pick and choose. Some of it is junk. And then when I compared that back to Flick, which is the software for scheduling and everything else, and, you know, analytics and obviously running for hashtags related to your niche, it's right. And so you can kind of taper up and down for it. And so that can save a huge amount of time researching the right hashtags for a post.
Yes, it's so good at research. Like I mean, these were developed as research tools. It's so good at research. Actually, that's I found another tool, Barely AI. That's BEARLY. So like barely.ai.
Yeah.
And all it is a research tool that these college students created, and all it is just preset prompts. But it's from the perspective of somebody in college doing research. So a lot of the preset prompts are like, provide a counter argument for this, and it has a Chrome extension, so you can pull the text from the page directly, and it's like provide a counter argument for this page, or for this article, provide a summary for this article, and you know, because it was designed, like I said, originally to be a research tool. So when you use it as a research tool, it's freaking phenomenal.
What about I think I asked you this before and we kind of cover it earlier, but to summarize, let's say I want to go and look at a load of research papers, and I want to compare 10, 15 different research papers on the subject to summarize it. I suppose the best way to do that is to go into the playground area and basically lay in the URLs for all of those, and then set the tone for what you expect it to do. So read these documents. From these documents, these are the key areas that are covered. There are a series of counter arguments here. We need to counter argue with all of these points to get a balance, and then bring them down as key bullet points in a summary at the end. So to put on a one-sheeter, with utilizing the cross-reference points of all of that research. Would that work in that sense as well? Because it takes from the URL rather than cutting and pasting the actual research papers.
And I mean, I could be mistaken on this. I haven't tried it, but as far as I understand, OpenAI is not able to access the web.
That's what
Here's the thing, though. So there's another Facebook group out there. It's all about ChatGPT. It's like ChatGPT content marketing or something like that. Anyway, in that group, a guy shared Excel spreadsheet for free that he created using regex. I don't know if you're familiar what that means. It's a regular expression. It's just like a language that people can use in Excel. Through a series of these regex expressions, he was able to get the spreadsheet, not Excel, sorry, Google Sheet, to scrape a web page when you put the URL inside the sheet.
Right.
And then takes the scraped text from that web page, and it automatically feeds it to a prompt that you put on the sheet to OpenAI. So how you would accomplish what you're talking about is you would use a sheet like that, and you would scrape those pages so that they're all text on web enabled, you
Hmm.
would have each one of them summarized first.
Hmm.
And then after you have them summarized, you would take all of them as input into
Hmm.
OpenAI's playground area. And you
Yeah.
would say, here's a summary of these papers. You give the name of the paper so it knows what you're talking about, because it did have access to the internet at
Hmm.
one point.
Yeah.
Say, here's the name of the paper. Here's a summary given to me by OpenAI for
Mhm.
all of them, right? Within the token limit. Hopefully you can get all 15, depending
Yeah.
on how long the summaries are. Then you would say, I need you to create, counter arguments for these and structure responses, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
So it's a little bit more work right now until somebody builds an interface that does the scrape, like everything that this Google Sheet does
Yeah.
in an interface. Until that happens, it's like I said, we're still early, man. We're really early. So a
Yeah.
little bit extra work, but yeah, you could still get it done that way.
Yeah. Sounds good. Let's wrap here. Did you want to mention the group at all that you got?
Yeah. Well, I can't remember what I called it though. So I started a little Facebook group. It's called OpenAI and ChatGPT 3/Dolly Prompt Engineering. The whole purpose of the group is for us to have a conversation about making OpenAI do the stuff we want it to do. So this is where we talk about like what we basically talked about in this episode, which is shortcuts, hacks, cheat codes on how to communicate with the AI and get it to give you better information. It's been fun. I share everything that I discover in there, so I encourage people to join.
Excellent. And what's the best way that people can reach you?
You can email me directly if you'd like, Anthony@signalytics.ai. Also, I'm still everywhere on the socials. Come into the group. I'm in there. Find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, psych_marketer, etc. So yeah, I'm around. I mean, it's not hard.
Cool. Anthony, thank you for joining us today. Guys, thank you for joining us. Sharon will be up next. Take care of yourself and your family. Much love, and I'll see you again soon.